is a French cake, all dressed up and ready to go to a party, out dancing. It's a very special kind of cake, and it's quite used to being dressed up, as you will see when we do a Genoise today on the French Chef.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation and by a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated.
We're going to make one of the most important of the French basic cakes today, a Genoise. It's the kind of cake that you use for wedding cakes or for petits fours or for big fancy layer cakes. And we've done so many cakes that I'm not going to do any of the elementary details like how to measure flour or how to prepare a cake pan, because we're going to get out of the kindergarten today and into the big time. And for this recipe, we want to start out with 5 tablespoons of melted butter. I needn't say that you should always read the recipe before you do a cake and assemble all of your ingredients. And the first thing to do with this, in this recipe, is to melt the butter first, because it has to be tepid when it gets mixed into the batter later on. And then we want 1½ cups of sifted cake flour, and this is plain bleached cake flour that you buy in a box. And to measure it, be sure, as we've done many times, sift it directly into your 1 cup and your 1/2 cup measures, and sift it until it's overflowing, and then sweep the excess off and put it back into your sifter. That will give you about 4 ounces of flour, and that's all you want for this recipe. And then preheat your oven to 325 degrees and prepare your cake pan by lightly buttering it, putting a piece of wax paper in the bottom, buttering that, dusting it with flour and knocking out the excess. That we've done many times before too. And then you're ready to go. And we want 4 eggs, and these are U.S. graded large eggs. That's always important in a recipe too, that you use the kind of eggs that they say, otherwise you get too much and then the batter won't go into your pan. And we want 2/3 cup of granulated sugar and 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And be sure you use vanilla extract and not imitation vanilla, because this is a high-class cake and we don't want any ersatz things in it. And then, if you'd like, use the grated rind of either an orange or a lemon. This is a nice addition, which I like, but you don't have to put it in. And be sure that you just get the orange part of it, and that goes into your bowl. And then I'm going to check my butter, because I want to be sure that this has just melted, and that's probably melted just enough so I can take it off, because it's very important that it be tepid. And now we come to the great difference between the Genoise cake and all the other cakes we've done. I have a pan of simmering, almost simmering water. And these are going to be beaten over this almost simmering water. Now, all the other cakes that we've made have been called the sponge cake type, or the, in the French terms, the biscuit. And these have been like our cake for company, which was a butter sponge cake, and the reine de Saba with chocolate and almonds, and the marquis au chocolat, which was a plain chocolate cake. In these, you separated the eggs and you folded the egg whites into the cake batter. But in the Genoise, you beat the whole eggs and the sugar and the flavoring over hot water until the mixture has doubled in volume and is foamy and is warm to your finger. And I'm using a metal bowl to beat these in, because I found that using a glass bowl, it just takes quite a long time. This is going to take 5 to 6 minutes. And as you notice, you don't have to beat very hard, about 2 strokes a minute. And make sure that your water is not actually simmering. Now, while I'm beating, I'm going to give you those ingredients again, in case you didn't get them written down. That is 5 tablespoons of butter, melted and tepid. And then you have what I have in this bowl now, 4 large eggs, 2/3 cup of granulated sugar, 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and if you want, the grated rind of an orange or a lemon. And then later on, 1 1/2 cups of sifted plain bleached cake flour. And remember how you sift that directly into your cup measures. And that's all the ingredients that this basic cake has. Then it has a great frosting which goes on top of it. As you see, this is beginning to foam up, and it has almost doubled in volume. And the only way you can tell whether this is warm is by sticking your finger in. Your clean, washed, healthy finger. That's your really only test. Stick it in quickly and see if it's warm to your finger. And lick it off and see if it tastes good. This, if you're not going to use your fingers in cooking, sometimes it's not going to turn out very well, because you'd never get a thermometer to register the heat of this. You just keep on beating. As I said, it'll be 5 to 6 minutes. And if you have I got this metal bowl at my supermarket on a sale. It's a stainless steel bowl, and it's a quite heavy one, and it does extremely well for this kind of beating. Or if you happen to have a copper egg beating bowl, that would be what the French chefs would use. Now I'm going to give it another finger test. And that is almost warm enough. It's not hot, it's warm. Because if you heat it too much, then the eggs will get too thick. And I think that's enough, and as you can see that is just a warm, foamy. It hasn't been heated so much that it makes the ribbon. But the reason that you do heat it over the water is so that the sugar will dissolve completely, because then it's going to be beaten more until it gets thick and makes the ribbon. And you can beat it by hand, like this with a big whip, for 5 to 6 minutes until it's cool, or you can beat it in the machine. And I have another mixture which is just exactly the same, and I'm beating it in a glass bowl so you can see better. And this has to beat for 5 to 6 minutes until it's cool and thick and makes the ribbon, and I'll show you. But while it's being beaten, we have time to make a frosting and filling for the cake. And this is going to be the classic French buttercream, crème au beurre. And we've done several types of crème au beurre, and this one is going to be the classic French one that they use in most of the pastry shops, which starts with a sugar syrup. That old sugar boiling again. This is going to make about 3 cups. And for this we want 2/3 cup of granulated sugar and 1/4 cup of water. And this, as you remember with the sugar boiling, I'm just going to, as usual, go through just a sample of this for you because we've done it so many times. Be sure that you let the sugar clear, in other words, that it's completely dissolved. The liquid, which is now a cloudy look, you wait until it begins to boil and you shake the pan around with your hand on the handle until it begins to boil and the liquid is perfectly clear and limpid. And while that's coming up to the boil, I'm going to put in the ingredients for our buttercream. And this is 1 whole egg, again, a U.S. large egg, and 3 egg yolks. And these go into a bowl. Now I'm going to take a look at that sugar. Now as soon as that's cleared, let it boil down until it reaches the soft ball stage. That is 238. You know, you drop it in a piece of water, in a bit of cold water, and pick it up. It makes a soft ball in your fingers, or 238 degrees. And then this very slowly gets poured into your egg mixture. See, by pouring it very, very slowly in, the eggs are not going to curdle or scramble. I'm purposely doing this technique because it will sort of reinforce the whole Genoise principle. And then this again gets beaten over hot water. And in this, you beat it for about 7 or 8 minutes until it becomes thick and makes the ribbon. Again, this is just a sample of it. It's thick and makes the ribbon, and this is the ribbon here when you let it fall down. See, it falls from your beater and makes a ribbon on the surface which slowly dissolves. But you have to be sure that you let it beat until it's thick, and it's quite a bit hotter to your finger than the Genoise mixture was. Now back to our Genoise mixture, and I'm just going to change bowls here. I always find it very convenient indeed to have 2 bowls for every mixture. I think that's better than two cars for every garage. Now I want you to see how this looks. See, this again makes the ribbon. You see, that falls onto the surface and makes this ribbon that slowly dissolves. And that was 5 to 6 minutes of beating the eggs and the sugar. And now you are ready to finish the Genoise batter. And this is the most tricky part of all. I think the beating of the eggs is perfectly simple if you just watch the water. But in the folding in, and this is where you can run into trouble, you have your 5 tablespoons of butter, and it is tepid, it's not hot, and you have your flour all sifted, and have I'm using just a big rubber pancake turner, and I'm going to put a wet pot holder here, and you want to keep folding continually while you do this. And you sift on about 1/4 of the flour. And notice this folding technique of going straight down and to the side and up. And you keep turning your bowl a little bit. And then when that is almost folded in, pour on about 1 tablespoon of your butter and keep right in folding. The tricky part of this is if you don't keep on folding, the butter sinks down to the bottom of the batter. And if you poured all the butter in at once, also the batter might collapse. And if the butter were hot, the batter might collapse. So that's why you want to be sure that it is tepid. Now I'll sprinkle on some more of the flour. You can see there it's just continually being folded in, and then a little bit more of the butter. And be sure with the butter, always know in the melted butter you have a little bit of milky residue, which the French call le petit lait, in the bottom, and you do not add that. So actually what you're having is really 4 tablespoons of clear butter. Then goes in the rest of your flour. And then you're ready to go into the pan, and do not stop at all. That's one reason you have your pan all ready. And do not overfold. And then in it goes into the pan. Now I'm going to have to use another rubber spatula to get the rest of this out. But you see, really the whole trick in this cake is this rapid folding and not stopping for a moment, and then take your spatula and push it up and tilt your pan to make the batter run up to the pan all the way around, and then it won't make a hump in the middle. And this is an 8 by 8 by 2 pan. It's a little bit bigger than it needs to be, but you never want to fill the cake pan more than about 2/3 full. It's better to underfill it than overfill it. But anyway, it's a 6-cup pan, and now immediately bake it. And this is in a preheated 325-degree oven, and it goes into the lower middle level. And set your timer for 35 minutes, and this will take 35 to 45 minutes to cook. There's 35 minutes. And it is done when it will rise to about double, and it will be sort of springy to the touch. When you touch it, it springs back. And it is very lightly golden brown, and then your final and definite test is that it is shows a hairline of shrinkage around the edge of the pan, and then you know it's definitely done. Take it out of the pan, take it out of the oven and let it cool for 10 minutes, and then reverse it on a cake rack and peel off the paper. And as soon as it's cool, you should cover it with a plastic bag because it dries out rather quickly. And after it's cold, you can freeze it. These cakes freeze perfectly, or you can keep it in the refrigerator for several days. As long as it's wrapped, it won't dry out. And then you are ready to fill and frost it. But be sure that you don't attempt to fill and frost a cake until it is absolutely cold, because if the cake is still warm, the frosting will all fall off of it. Then, as in typical French fashion, the cake is cut in half, which I think really makes cakes easier to do because you don't have to bake two of them. And take a big knife and just frankly slice it in half, trying to make it as even as possible. The reason that's not quite even on the top. That's not going to make too much difference because it's going to be covered. But the reason the Genoise is so good for layer cakes and for petits fours is that it's a little firmer cake than a sponge cake, because a sponge cake, just as they say, is spongy. And I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of liqueur on the top of this cake just to give it a little more. That's probably about half a teaspoon on each thing. I'm using some kirsch. You could use orange liqueur or nothing, which would be too bad. And now this cake is all ready to fill, but the filling isn't quite ready for the cake. And this was supposedly beating, but it was cold anyway. But you have beaten your buttercream and sugar syrup until it is cool to the touch. And then you're ready to add butter to it. And you want 2 sticks or half a pound of softened, unsalted butter. And beat it up until it's nice and fluffy, and then just gradually beat it into your cool egg yolk and sugar syrup mixture. Really, it's a very simple frosting to make, I think. Just in it all goes. And then as soon as in just no time at all, that's all absorbed. And then you want a little bit of flavoring. I'm going to put in a little bit of vanilla. About a teaspoonful, and then some more liqueur. You don't have to use liqueur if you don't want. You could use strong coffee. I'm putting in 2 or 3 tablespoons of kirsch, gradually. And if you find by any chance that I was going to pie plate here. If you find by any chance that after you've added the liqueur that the buttercream seems to separate, simply add a little bit more butter, and that will immediately smooth it out. And now we are ready to fill the cake. And just spread. This recipe for camembert makes just about 3 cups, which is enough for an 8 to 9 inch cake for both filling and frosting. You see what a lovely, creamy mixture that is. I'm spreading about 1/8 of an inch on top, and then reform the cake. And when you frost the cake, you want to leave it upside down. Because if you do it right side up, it's not quite as flat, and the upside down part is flat, is more even. And now to frost it, you just simply spread this lovely business on top and on the sides. I'm going to put on my glasses so I can really see what's going on. Only trouble with this buttercream is that it's too good. It just has the most lovely flavor. And the reason that you use unsalted butter is that you don't want salt in a frosting like this. You just want it a lovely, fresh, buttery consistency. And one reason it's nice to have these French rather low cakes, which this is the typical size, about 1.5 inches to 2, is it's so easy to frost because you can pick it right up in your hands. And if you wish, you can put an apricot glaze on the cake before you put the buttercream on. The apricot glaze is simply apricot preserves pushed through a sieve and then boiled down with a little bit of sugar until it's thick and sticky. And if you were doing frosting a sponge cake, I think it's a good idea to put the apricot glaze on, because a sponge cake gets a little crummy and can come off on your frosting. And try to get that as even as possible. See, this is quite different than what is known as a fondant frosting, or one that you pour over the cake, which is absolutely smooth. I'll put that down on the rack and smooth this out a little bit more. You can take a spatula and dip it into water. You'll have some hot water here, and that will smooth it out. Now, if you've made your buttercream ahead of time and put it in the refrigerator, you find that you'll have to beat it up fairly hard to bring it back to this nice smooth consistency. But it will come back to the nice consistency after you've beaten it. Taken a little bit off the top there. I think this buttercream with the sugar syrup is used because it holds up a little bit better in warm weather. And now we can do a decoration with chocolate for this. And I've got some chocolate melting in the oven. This is actually a wonderful way to melt chocolate if you have an oven that you control to about 175. You just put the chocolate in the pan, and in about half an hour it's completely beautifully melted and smooth. Then this goes into the buttercream and gets beaten. But this is a little bit too liquid to spread, and you'd have to either refrigerate it for a little while or beat it over some ice water, and I have some over here that should be just about right. Because I'm going to put this through a pastry bag, and if it's too soft, nothing like having hundreds of beaters around, is there? Now this has got to be nice and smooth and just of the right consistency to go into a pastry bag, which I trust that is. And I'm going to put this into a pastry bag with a sort of toothed nozzle. You could use a paper cone, but I think if you want to have some kind of a sort of a decoration such as I'm going to show you, the toothed nozzles are the best. Now, I'm just going to see again if that cake is as smooth as it ought to be. I think that looks fairly well. If I had a little more time, I could probably be a little smoother with it, but the main thing is to show you how to go about this. Now, ideally, one would have worked out a pattern on a piece of paper and had followed it, and then you won't end up with something a little bit lopsided. I have not done that, which I really should have. So I hope things are going to turn out well. I'm going to start with a rosette in each corner. You can see why when you start doing these that people say that being a pastry chef is a lifetime work, because it's purely a matter of practice, 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 like almost everything else. Well, that, I must say, that looks lovely coming up there. There's something about the kirsch and the chocolate that's lovely. Now, as I said, the only trouble with these things are they're just too good. Remember when you're using your pastry bag, when you start out on the decoration, keep the bag a little bit about, say, a quarter to a half inch above above the surface of the cake. Now, that looks pretty good. I think these a little bit. I don't know, as I'm not ruining that by putting those on there. Maybe not. Put a fuller. So I'm going to put, I think, a great big thing in the middle of this. And then this, after you've done it, you should put it in the refrigerator to set, and then take it out, and it will, when it becomes rather dull looking in the refrigerator, and then if you take it out and keep it out for a while, it'll become brilliant again. Now, the first Genoise cake that I made just absolutely fell flat on its face, and so did I. And it wasn't until I'd made several of them that I began to get the knack. So don't you get discouraged if the first one that you make doesn't work well. Just keep at it, and you'll get it. So that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
The French Chef has been made possible by a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated and by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation.
Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking.